Good evening. First of all, how's the weather down in Waikiki? Swimming today? Be sure before you get away, those of you who can, to see that Hawaii Calls and Hawaiian Village. Don't go without seeing those. They're really worthwhile. The rest I'm sure you'll find for yourselves. Those two, perhaps. Most of you have heard in our classes that my experience in the healing came through a spiritual experience without any knowledge of what it was that healed, and that it was only in after years of study and experiment and practice and more revelation that the answer came. How spiritual healing is accomplished. Of course, it was so different, this way that revealed itself to me was so different than what was being taught, that I found it very difficult to teach it, found very few who could understand what I was trying to say. And I might as well admit that I still have that same difficulty, because the actual truth as it is, insofar as spiritual healing is concerned, is so strange, so revolutionary, so different than human thought can grasp, that it makes it a difficult matter. And here and there, of course, some of our students do catch it, but it isn't easy, not because it itself is difficult, probably because I have had difficulty in imparting it. It's stated clearly enough in the writings, but even that hasn't seemed to do what I've expected of it. And so it comes to me as a very great pleasure that in the June letter this year, the principle is stated as I have never before been able to state it. Accurately, concisely, definitely. And the only difficulty there is going to be in your understanding it is the revolutionary nature of it, so far as the average person and their studies make it difficult. Now let me explain what I mean. In almost all healing work, you are dealing with persons. It's a Jones, Brown, or Smith, a Mr., a Mrs., a Miss, or a Master. And you are dealing with specific conditions. Now, the condition may be physical, mental, moral, or financial. Or it may be one of relationships. It may be one of family relationships. on the husband-wife level, or the children-parent level, or parent-children level, or in-law level, or it can be relationships in business or relationships in government. Now, in almost every form of healing that is known, whether mental or spiritual, the individual to be healed is a major factor in the demonstration. In other words, you deal directly with that person and with their conditions, and you deal as if to correct them in some way on the human level. You probably, those of you who have had mental or spiritual healing, have undoubtedly had the experience of the practitioner asking for details of what might have caused it, or even, in many cases, telling you what caused it, or of telling you what you must do in order to be free, or how you must cooperate in order to be free. Now, I can, of course, start out with Dr. Menninger, who is undoubtedly considered the greatest psychologist in the United States, and tell you that he said on a broadcast, a nationwide broadcast, that so far they had never healed a disease, but they were sure they were on the right track. Last year, or it may have been the year before last, when a lady here who has devoted 22 years to the study and practice of psychology found a great deal of fault with me because I do not agree that the spiritual and the mental are the same, and who had the idea that I was very much opposed to the mental, had 2 evenings with me, 2 6-hour evenings, to discuss some of these points. And at one time she asked the blank question, why do you have such a hatred for the mental approach to life? And I said, you misunderstand entirely. I have no hatred. I have no feeling other than this. It's been in existence quite a while, and it has, up to now, not one single success to bring to its credit. How can you say that? This is a profession or work 105 years old. And I myself have devoted 22 years to its practice. Well, I said, then I'm going to let you bear witness. And so we traced her career in hospitals, in schools, in the law courts, in the prisons, and in the mental institutes. And when we got through, she acknowledged she had never seen or heard of an actual healing in those 22 years. Not one. Not one could she bring up in defense of that which she was trying to defend. No, she said, you're right. We have operated in the mental institutes, but we are not healing people through psychology. We are operating in the law courts, but we are not healing men and women of vice. We are working in the divorce courts, but we are not preventing divorce. We are working in the schools, but we have not yet found the solution to the so-called immorality in universities and high schools, nor the solution to juvenile delinquency. Now, these are 2 pretty good authorities, one who's devoted 22 years and the other one who has the biggest reputation in the entire field. And there is an answer to that. Someday they're going to be very successful, just as psychiatry is when it adopts solely the Jung school of psychiatry as its basis. There's a reason for these things, just as there is a reason that the New Thought movement in the United States has shrunk about 90% in 30 years. So that in some of our major cities there isn't even a New Thought activity. And the same is true of Europe. There's a reason. You cannot mentally or spiritually heal an individual if you attempt to heal them or if you attempt to work with their problem. It cannot be done. Spiritual healing must be based on the recognition of this. The individual who is sick or sinful or unsuccessful or unhappy or poor is in no wise responsible. They have nothing to do with the situation under any circumstances, regardless of what the name or nature of the disease may be or claim of other direction. They are not responsible. All the responsibility lies with a universal thing, activity, a universal force or power that makes us victims of sin, disease, death, lack, and limitation, unhappiness, quarrelsomeness, meddlesomeness, and all of these other things. There is no use of telling a nervous person, you mustn't be so nervous. They know that before you told it to them, and they'd like to be free of it. There is no use telling a miser that you're just bringing unhappiness on yourself with your miserliness. They know that. How are you going to heal them of miserliness? By telling them that they're misers. They know that already. And they know they can't help it. They know they live in fear of every dollar they spend. They don't know why. You might as well tell a spendthrift that he's going to come upon bad days if he doesn't stop squandering his money. He knows that too. He knows that. He has no control. If you want to heal him, bring the control to him so that he no longer indulges these squanderings. It is the same way with a person, whether they have cancer or tuberculosis or paralysis. Are you going to hold them responsible for that? You say, well, some of them. Why some of them? Oh, no. If you want to heal spiritually, now mind you, I'm not talking about medical healing. Medical healing is based on an entirely different premise. Spiritual healing has to be based not on what is wrong with an individual, but with an understanding of what brought about that fault, that trouble, that sin, that disease, that false appetite, or whatever it is. And whatever it is not personal to that individual. Now, this is what makes it difficult to teach this subject. It seems so strange to say that a person is not responsible for their own difficulties, and yet they're not. They are the victims. We all are. We all are. The person who sits in a draft and catches cold is the victim of a universal belief that is false from top to bottom, because as soon as people are enlightened as to this, they're free of colds. They're free of headaches. They're free of indigestion. As soon as a person begins to understand something of this principle, they become free of the vast majority of the ills that humans ordinarily have. Now, in the very earliest days of my practice, I would say probably 2 years after I was engaged in the active practice, this revelation came to me. that there was no use ever dealing with the person or with the condition. And these are a few of the experiences that led up to that. There was a woman confined to bed with arthritis, and she was really crippled from shoulders to ankles. And she had been in metaphysics for many years and had some of the very best of the practitioners and teachers that were available. And none of them could heal her, and they all knew why. She was a mean, nasty woman. And she was. There's no doubt about it. She was, and as far as I know, she is. And that degree of nastiness and ugliness and temper and viciousness, really, according to these people, must be responsible for this horrible condition. And now, along about that particular period, I was called into this case, and I lived 250 miles from this lady, and I knew her reputation. And when the call came, I smiled. I thought, well, because I'm young at it, they think perhaps I can get by something. Maybe so. But the first 3 weeks, I had absolutely no success at all. There wasn't a sign or trace of any improvement. And then a telephone call came one evening that the pain is so terrible that if something isn't done immediately, they don't see how the lady can survive. And I said, all right, I will stay up tonight, all night, until something cracks. And the way I work on those things is this. I will sit up and meditate. And I may meditate 15 minutes or might be an hour or two. And then I'll stop and lie down and either rest or take a nap and then get up and start all over again. And it might be 15 minutes, or it might be an hour or two, until I feel some sense of release. And then I'll stop, read, probably take a shower, probably lie down and take a nap again for a little while. And so I will go on all night until I know definitely that something has happened. But I was getting on toward 2 o'clock in the morning and nothing was happening. And I got a little bit peeved. Some of you know I get a little angry with God once in a while, and I have a heart-to-heart talk with him and tell him what I think about him, and then he yields and says, well, I'll treat you better. And so I did. I had quite a chat with him that night, and I ended up by saying, now look, there is a truth, there is a specific truth, and if you would just let me know that truth, this lady could be healed. Now, why are you holding out on me? Let's have it, and we'll have a healing. And I sat down to meditate. Nothing came. Finally, I lied down, take a nap. And in my sleep, I heard the voice, and it awakened me. And here is what that voice said. Now, remember that at no time during this evening am I thinking of her or arthritis. I'm meditating and thinking of God and a truth. The answer came, that which I am seeking, I am. And I shook my head, no, I'm seeking a truth. Just a truth that'll heal. Again, that which I am seeking, I am. And a third time. Well, how can that be? I am the truth? That's impossible. Then it came back from the Bible. That's what Jesus said. I am the truth. Oh, well, that's different. If I am the truth, this lady is the truth. This man is the truth. Because the truth must be universal. It must be infinite. It can't have one person, for an example, and not another. Well, then what am I worried about? And I went to sleep. At 8 o'clock in the morning, I had a call that the lady was completely free of pain, and within a few weeks she was completely healed. Now you see, it had nothing to do with arthritis, and it had nothing to do with that lady. It had to do with whether or not I made contact with a truth. Now then, shortly after that, a man was brought to my office, sent home from a tuberculosis sanatorium to die, to be with his family when the end came. One of his salesmen had insisted that he come to my office and see if I couldn't help him. And he came to the office. I talked to him a while, and not very long, just long enough to establish the fact that he was willing to have treatment and to keep in touch with me. And then the man said, well, as long as you're going to treat me for tuberculosis, I'd like to tell you that I can only drink liquids. I can't eat solid food because I have pyorrhea. My teeth are all loose. Would you treat me for that too? Yes, surely. And then a little later we went into our meditation. Well, as a matter of fact, I didn't think of the tuberculosis. Again, I went to my God. But as an actual fact, I knew that in the background there was this tuberculosis, but I forgot completely about pyorrhea. And then you can imagine what happened the next morning when he called and said, my God, what have you done to me? And I said, well, I haven't killed you because you're on the phone. What else did I do? Well, I said, I'm scrubbing my teeth for 5 minutes this morning. They're solid in the sockets. Oh, I said, you've got a fine practitioner. And I knew then again that it had nothing to do with me. It had nothing to do with him. It had nothing to do with pyorrhea. It had to do with the principle of God realization. And it was only a few weeks later that he called up and said that I owed him several $100s for the new clothes he had to have made. He'd gained so much weight. And he was healed. Now, you know, if you just have enough of those experiences, you must wake up to the fact that you're not dealing with persons or their backgrounds. You're not dealing with what made them sick. You're not dealing even with them as persons. You're dealing with a universal force that is making every one of us what we are until we awaken. We're told when we awaken we'll be in his likeness. We'll be satisfied. But as long as we are asleep in this human dream, we are being acted upon much in the same way that St. Paul said, I don't sin, but I find a sense of sin still in me. Certainly, he found these false desires in him. He knew enough to be through with those things. But this universal force wasn't going to quite let him alone until he rose still higher. So it is with everybody. As long as we are humans, we are going to be tempted. And we are going to be tempted with something that is not personal. I'll give you the experience of Jesus Christ, who even after he was engaged in this spiritual ministry was taken up to a wilderness and tempted 3 times. Tempted with lack, tempted with a desire for fame, tempted with a desire for security, and of course he knew enough to meet it. But let's not deny that he was tempted, because there it states so in Scripture, not only that he was tempted, but that he named the tempter the devil. Now, we don't use that word devil today, but we could, because it is an entity, it is an identity that is tempting us. It has many, many names. Its name is Legion. Yes, that's what Scripture says. Its name is Legion. And in the early days of Christian Science, they gave the term mortal mind to that which is the universal force from which we're suffering, that produces the sins, diseases, and ailments of mankind. It began back with Anton Mesmer when he called it animal magnetism. Now, in our work, we also have used many names for it. Hypnotism, mesmeric suggestion, belief. In the last few years, another term has come to me, which you'll find in the June letter, the fabric of nothingness. But I can now tell you its right name, because now I know. Without doubt, without question, because I know by revelation, and since I've had the revelation, I've had the proof. The name of it is mind. M-I-N-D. Mind. Mind is the substance of every form of sin, disease, death, false appetite, lack, limitation, wars, rumors of wars, scandals, and all the rest of these things that are headed under the word evil. The substance and cause of them is mind. Now, whether we call it your mind or my mind, it is only your mind or my mind in the sense that it is a universal mind which acts through you and acts through me and acts through all of us. When you get to be about 45, your oculist will tell you you must have eyeglasses because of the hardening of the... and a lot of us fall for it. That's a universal claim. You see, that isn't mine, and that isn't yours. That is a universal claim of mind, and it hits us when we're 45. Women get hit with something else. But don't doubt this, that it isn't your claim. It's a universal one also, and it couldn't function except for mind. Now I'm going to tell you the benefit of this revelation. When you are called upon for yourself, your family, or others, instead of pouncing on them and trying to make them better than they are, instead of condemning yourself or others, sit very quietly and realize that this is just another form of mind presenting itself to you. But the healing agency lies in your realization that mind is not a power, mind is not a reality, mind is nothing but a false sense of creation. The real intelligence of our being is soul or spirit. That's where intelligence is embodied. And mind is an instrument through which soul, spirit, divine intelligence can function. But since that experience that is called the fall of man, mind has been used as a creative faculty, a reasoning faculty, and for that reason it has come to function as a creative power. And that's what's troubling us today. The mind has been accepted by us as a creative power, and it creates these things of which we're suffering, and we accept them. Now, if you want to watch how miraculously this works, whenever you are tempted with any form of error, evil, sin, disease, death, lack, limitation, temper, whatever it may be, don't fight it. Resist not evil. Agree with thine adversary. Just sit down quietly and realize this. As the Master revealed it, God is the great and only creative principle of life. God is the source of all being. God alone. Thou shalt have no other gods, no other power no other creator but one. God alone is. And this thing that's bothering me can't be of God, so it must be of mind or nothingness. It is mind presenting a picture to me, like mind presented a picture to Jesus of wax. Mind presented a picture to Jesus of glory. Mind presented to Jesus a picture of safety and security, and as if they were to be found in the external realm, and they're not. There's no such thing as glory to be gotten in this world. There's no such thing as fame or fortune to be gotten in this world, and many of those who have gotten it in this world have lived to regret it, or else to find its worthlessness. When you realize that it is mind, a universal mind, that says to you that at this age you must be this, and at this age you must be that, and at this age you must be this, when in reality you are God's own image and likeness, the very own expression of its infinite being, then you will know enough to turn on this and not treat it as an enemy. No, mind isn't an enemy, and you'll never get anywhere fighting mind. But if you understand mind to be a false sense of a creative principle, something we've accepted as creative, and then realize it isn't really. There's only one creative principle, and that's God. There's only one sustaining and maintaining influence, and that is God. Someday, when you begin to understand the nature of spiritual law, you will know that God alone is spirit, and that all law must be spiritual. And then you learn something that will help you heal disease as you have never known before. You will know there is no such thing as a law of disease. There never was, and there never will be. There can't be a law of disease, because if there were, the law would sustain it forever. Anything that's upheld by law is eternally held up. The only thing that you can bring to an end is something that hasn't a law to sustain it. And always remember, disease has no law. None whatsoever. A lot of theories about it, and most of the theories about disease that were held 20 years ago have been dropped into the ash can. And so it's always been. Every 10 or 20 years, these laws of disease are changed. Well, let us remember this. Anything is a law that mind can force us to accept. That doesn't mean that it is law. Not any more than any law on our legal books is law. There never has been a law on the law books of this nation. There never will be a law. There are a lot of things written down that act as law until some more clever attorney comes along and has it set aside, or until the Supreme Court decides it really never was law. There's no such thing as law. We make rules and live under them as if they were laws until sometime when those particular laws are set aside and we know they never were laws. We merely accepted them as such during that period of time. Spiritual law is something entirely different. Spiritual law is that which underlies this creation. You see, God is a spirit, and God's creation is spiritual, and therefore it is invisible to us. No man has ever seen God's creation with his eyes, nor touched it with his fingers. God's creation is only discerned in mysticism by those during spiritual illumination. That which we see, hear, taste, touch, and smell comes under the heading of the 2nd chapter of Genesis, a universe created by mind. Remember that in the real creation, the crop was in the ground before the seed was planted. There was light before there was sun. Never forget that that creation is spiritual. To perceive it, you have to perceive the meaning of the passage, a stone carved out of the side of a mountain without hands. That's a scriptural passage. And it describes an actual experience, but a spiritual experience, not a physical one. In the same way, when you're engaged in this healing work, and the cases multiply and multiply and multiply until you have to stay in the Spirit in order to meet your work, you then find that you have flashes of the real or spiritual creation, and you do see the man made in God's image and likeness. It isn't a continuous experience. It is an occasional experience when you're on the highest level of consciousness. But there is a real creation, and it is harmonious, and nothing has ever interfered with the harmony of the development and unfoldment of spiritual man. The second chapter of Genesis gives us the physical creation, which is a creation of mind. And that is why mind plays such a powerful part in this world. Your hand can't move without mind to move it. Your body can't function without mind to function it. The body can't fall in love with anybody. The body is dead. There has to be a mind behind the body. The body cannot steal or lie or cheat or defraud. There has to be a mind behind it. As a matter of fact, you can't even obey the Ten Commandments without a mind to direct and govern your body. So that on the human level, mind governs your body and mind governs all creation. But remember this, it governs it both good and evil. It gives you health one day and sickness another day. It gives you wealth one day and lack the next day, and so forth and so on, because the mind, being of this earthy, is made up of the two qualities, good and evil. And therefore, it manifests and expresses itself as good and as evil. Until you rise above mind, you cannot rise above the pairs of opposites. You cannot rise above good and evil. It is only when you transcend mind and touch the realm of spirit, the kingdom of God, then you need no longer take thought for your life, or what you shall eat, or what you shall drink, or wherewithal you shall be clothed. Now you are living in a different consciousness. Now you do not have to use affirmations or denials. Now you do not have to use physical remedies or mental remedies. Now you contact or touch that spiritual center in which you find your peace, and then you find that you've transcended the activities of mind, both as to good and evil, and are living a normal life, a spiritual life, a life that, to a great extent, is untouched by the activity of mind. Now, do not forget this, that no one has ever claimed to have risen completely and permanently above the realm of mind. It is an experience that comes and in which eventually, such as the mystics, can be lived half or three-quarters of the time. And it is for that reason that, mystic or no mystic, the day will come when everyone disappears from this earth, and sometimes through disease or accident, for the simple reason that mind functions universally, and as long as it is universally accepted, everyone, even those who sometimes rise above it, will find themselves occasionally a part of it, more especially if they stay in it and live with it. There are some who retire after the realization of this comes to them, that they have been living in a mental universe of good and evil and now have access to the spiritual one. There are some who retire from this scene and do not mingle anymore and take on the world's problems. And there are those who have made wonderful demonstrations. Certainly we know of one man who only in this last couple of years passed on with a definite record behind him of having lived 700 years on this earth, but with a definite continued record. And there are many others of 200 and 300. But not one of those remains in the hurly-burly of daily living, even in spiritual teaching or healing. They retire from the world, and in the case of one that I know of, permits a few students to visit him once a year. Then the rest of the year he lives alone in his Shangri-La. Well, I would too if the impulse came to me to do so. But it doesn't. It comes to me to keep on with this work, and as long as it does, I'll do it. If I don't live 700 years, I'm sure wherever I do go, it'll be a nice place too. Probably meet all of you there in time. Because we get along together all right. Now, that brings up another facet of the same thing. I find as I go on in this work that there are students who come and are part of my life and my experience, and for one reason or another drop out. I find if I just stay in this long enough, though, they keep gradually coming back. And some have been coming back in these latter years, right from my very, very earliest days in the work. And some even who've dropped out since the Infinite Way days have started to trickle back. So I'm sure that all those who are of my own household are going to be with me unto eternity. And there's no way of them running away from me if we really belong to each other in consciousness. And I have seen that that is exactly the relationship with all who have friends, relatives, who pass from this site. You're not going to meet all of them in the latter days, but you're going to meet every one of them who is truly a part of your consciousness and whom you never want released from you, and where the feeling is mutual. We live as a state of consciousness, and we never lose out of our consciousness those who are of our household, and the others we don't want. Just like as we are here, we all have friends and relatives, some even of many years standing, who we never see, never meet, and have no desire to, because they are not of our state of consciousness, not of our household. And so I know from the experiences that I'm having that that is our permanent dispensation. We never will be separated from those we want to be with, providing they also want to be with us. It will have to be a mutual experience. Now, let me go back to this. This is the June 1957 letter. And I will say to you that you will gain from it a clearer understanding of the subject than I have been able to give you tonight. This really says it, and says it clearly, distinctly, concisely, and beautifully. I like it myself. Now, I can promise you that if you will practice it, not merely read it, reading won't do anyone any good, even if they read it 100 times, but to read it, to practice points of it, until consciousness opens to an inner apprehension of it, that makes the healer. And that is the letter. Now, it is part of a series that is being continued. July, August, September, and October. And with those letters, you will find the complete subject of healing. Now, this isn't the complete subject of the Infinite Way, because healing is one facet of the Infinite Way, but certainly no one who can't heal in some measure is going to be able to understand the infinite way, because if they understand the infinite way, they'll begin to heal. Therefore, take these letters, June through October. I haven't seen November or December yet, so I can't tell you what's in those. But June to October, I can tell you, is a series that embraces these healing principles and will, if you practice it, do this for you. It will train you never to look at a person and think for a moment that by correcting them or condemning them or judging them, that you're going to be a healing influence to them. On the other hand, don't believe that because someone is good and you can praise them and say nice things about them, that will heal them. Neither the right thinking about them, the right thinking won't heal them, and the wrong thinking won't hurt them. They and you and I are products of the second chapter of Genesis, which is a mental creation. And remember this, that mind never was the real creator, God or spirit. And mind is one of those things that God created. Therefore, mind itself is an effect, just as the products of mind are effects, and it is for that reason that mind cannot be a creator. It is not a cause, it is an effect. Now, God, soul, spirit, alone is cause. Mind and body are effects. The good and the bad of human existence are the effects of that universal belief that mind is a creator. And mind is not a creator. Here is a question on this subject. In giving a treatment, we had to put all thought of the person treated and his or her ailment out of our mind entirely. But before we do that, is it or is it not all right to bring the thought of the person to mind? That is, just merely to know whom we are treating. No, it isn't good. It isn't bad either. But it isn't good. It isn't necessary. It won't interfere, and if it helps you, it may be all right. Just as often knowing the truth consciously, specifically, is all right, although it's never necessary nor part of the work. So I would say this: adjust yourself to your treatment in any way you wish. And if it helps you just to think for a minute, well, I'm going to take up work for Mrs. Jones and then drop Mrs. Jones, that's perfectly all right. But be sure you have dropped her and gotten back to this principle to realize that Mrs. Jones isn't suffering from rheumatism, that the universal mind is claiming to present itself as the creator of rheumatism, and both mind and rheumatism are not spirit, reality, cause or effect, and learn to snap your finger at it. Now, this next part of the question, if it isn't an impertinent question, do you, when treating, do so for one person at a time, knowing at the beginning of each treatment which person you are treating, or, since you do not have many cases, do you treat several at a time? Now, let me make this very clear. There is no such thing as treating several at a time. There is no such thing. Now, I'll tell you that my experience is that for a period of surely 8, 9, 10 years, I took care of 70 to 80 cases a day, and in my last year of the practice, before I started teaching, my books show I took care of 135 cases per day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks. And I never gave a blanket treatment. And I never treated more than one at a time, and I don't believe it can be done. Now, how are those cases handled? In the same way that my mail is handled today and my telephone calls. And I will show you how it's done, because I expect eventually you must do likewise. When you write me for help, I receive your letter, and that brings you to my mind as an individual, and there's nobody else in my mind. Here is just you and your letter. You have now touched my consciousness. And so whatever I'm thinking is the direct response to you and to nobody else. Now, as a rule, I do not answer that letter immediately. It was over here on my file. Here comes a letter of such urgency and probably distance that it must be answered instantly. But remember this. This is now in my hand, and that's over there. So you and I are exclusively with each other. There's nobody else intruding. And then I sit down and I'll answer this letter. Now then, it may be this afternoon when I get to this one. What I do now is when I read it more thoroughly, and either I sit down immediately to answer, or I put it here and I walk out of my office into another room and sit down and meditate. Something in it has disturbed me. Something in it is bringing out a response which I know does not indicate healing. And so there's no use of answering it, because anything I would answer would just be a human being giving you cliches. It would not be a spiritual answer. And so I do nothing further until I've gone away, had my meditation, and if I get my click, then I come back and answer it. If not, that letter goes up there, waits for another little while. And so I go down through my mail. Well, ordinarily, as I go down through it, most of it, you must remember that my mail goes on all day and part of the night. In between, there are people with whom I'm talking and teaching. It isn't easy for me to come down from that level. So I can take my mail and with just brief meditation or inner touch, I can go and give my answer, and the healing work is accomplished. But any one of those that disturbs me to the extent that I can't answer it is put down until I go and have my meditation and arrive at an answer. I may have to, with one letter, spend 6, 8, or 10 periods in a day. Sometimes it may be the second or third day before I've had my release. Then I can answer the letter. Because always remember this. If you're called upon for help, nobody cares about you. When I'm called upon for help, there's really nobody cares about Joe Goldsmith. What they care about is their healing. They've only come to me because they understand that I may be an instrument for it. But if I'm not, they're going to get rid of me in a hurry and turn to someone else. Because it's never me that anyone's interested in. It's their healing. Now, you know that. You know that's true with you. And you know that if I turned to someone for help, it would be the same thing. I wouldn't care who it is, what they are, whether of high or low. I'm looking for healing, for release. And so are you, when you ask for help. And I realize, too, nobody cares what I write. Nobody cares what I can remember out of truth books, even out of the ones I wrote. What they want is a message from God when they come to me. And there's no use me writing to them until I feel that that click has come. Then I can answer them. That is why when you call me on the phone, I don't come back at you with metaphysical cliches. I don't tell you, oh, it isn't real, or any of that claptrap. It's just mouthing words. Usually I say, all right, you've turned to me, leave it with me, I'll take care of it. And either in that instant or later in my office or living room or wherever I wander up and down until I get my answer, then you may hear from me and you may get a message. It isn't always the message you like to hear. But it isn't I either who am responsible for it, and sometimes I do not even know what it means. I write it because that's what came through. There have been quite a few times in my experience when I've written to patients that you are healed. Take my word for it, it hasn't happened too often, and I don't like to do it, because when I write it, I don't really know that at all. It's just something saying it through me. And I look at it and I say, oh, I wish I hadn't written that, or I wish I could pull it back. Well, it's written, let it go. It's always turned out that way. But it's for that reason. Humanly, I will never write anyone, you're healed, or you're getting better, or you're progressing, unless something within me has said so. And the same way, when I write you a letter, or anybody that writes to me, I don't write the answers you'd like to hear or that I'd like to write. Sometimes you get the briefest kind of a message, and sometimes quite a long one. But it has nothing to do with me. It has to do with that click. It has to do with what comes through when I sit down with that pen. Now, I'm sure you know that with all the mail I have, I would rather they'd all be a half page, my answers, but actually I see some of them are 10 pages and 20 pages or 12 pages or 3 pages. And that is because that is the way it comes through. And so, please remember this. Every case is an individual case, and when it touches my consciousness, that is when it has to be translated. Now, if your problem hits my consciousness, and I am alert and realize, mind, nothingness, appearing as something, no substance, no law, no cause, and I really have that conviction, the work is done. If it isn't, I just have to do it when you write again or phone, and again, and again, and again, because there are times when your healing is delayed, because the practitioner is not high enough in consciousness at that particular time. But mostly, your healing is delayed because you are not yet ready. And the reason you're not ready is this: you're all ready to let go of the disease. Oh, sure. Who isn't? All ready to get rid of the pain. But what about the accompanying thought or life or state of consciousness that's producing this trouble that you're accepting? Paul says you must die daily. And he didn't mean you must just die daily to your pains. No. You've got to die daily to some of these traits that have been built up in you through environment, false education, or one thing or another, false ideas. More especially, in order to be healed, one must be able to grasp the fact, healed spiritually, that we're not dealing just with physical healing, that we're dealing with a change of consciousness. I've said to you before, too many people write me insisting on giving me all the diagnoses. If I could read them all, I'd have to be a good doctor to be able to read all the diagnoses that there are, and I'm not even a poor doctor, much more a good one, and certainly not a diagnostician. Now, when you realize that, and think of how many people are just sitting around looking at their body, waiting for us to heal their bodies, without one single sign in them of transformation of consciousness, and then you'll know why sometimes healings do not come rapidly. Yes, it is done one at a time, and time itself is no element, because just as you could say to a bookkeeper, how much is 12 times 12? And they could instantly tell you 144 without writing it, without figuring, without anything. So, if a person has been in this work any length of time, the minute you present the problem, their consciousness immediately goes to work to nullify it without processes. And so, time is not an element, except in those cases where the answer does not come quickly. Is insanity or its milder form, neurosis, anywhere connected with the search for God? Is it possible that the physical senses, incessantly contradicting what is trying to come forth from the soul, may be causing such a condition? I doubt it very much. No, you do find, now I'm sure a lot of you have heard this statement. It isn't nice, but it's heard very often, that you don't have to be insane to be a metaphysician, but it helps. And the reason that statement came into being is this: that just as there are people coming to metaphysical and spiritual help for corns and bunions and indigestion and cancer and consumption, remember there are many coming for nervous disorders and mild forms of mental instability, and until they are healed, it is very natural that somebody is going to comment, oh, well, that's what it does to you. That is what it does to you. You've come with that, and so it is. There are people who come to metaphysics and do not quickly learn the nature of it and believe that they can study metaphysics for a healing while still living dishonestly, without integrity, so forth and so on. And you're apt to hear that too. Well, you see, it takes all kinds to make a metaphysician. They're crooked. Of course they're not crooked. If they once perceive the nature of the spiritual life, it transforms them. But every kind of person with every kind of physical, mental, moral, financial claim comes to the study of metaphysics or spiritual healing, and you have to take them where they are. That is why we cannot turn away anybody because they do not seem mentally stable or because they do not seem morally stable. That's not our business. Our business is the transformation of consciousness, and we take the student where they are and then come forth through there. Now, okay, you can cut. I'll just finish.